This recording is long overdue. My name is Rob, and I'm in recovery from a gambling addiction. I made my last bet November the 12th of 2022. Since that point, I've been creating content online about my story of addiction and recovery. And the number one question that I'm always asked, how do I quit gambling? Not everyone that gambles gets addicted to it, but if you're watching this video, maybe your gambling has become a problem. Maybe you're considering that it could become a problem. I don't know where you're at, but I know for me, I was gambling 6 to 8 hours every day compulsively to the point where I was in debt 6 times over 6 years that I could not even win my way out of. So, in this video today, which honestly is going to be probably a bit of a long video, I'm going to go through my story, the signs of addiction that I should have been recognizing in myself, and maybe you could recognize in yourself, and then my entire process for how I left gambling in the past. So, if you, a loved one, or basically anyone you know, wants to quit gambling, my goal today is to give you a total guide on how to do so because life is better, and I want to dive into exactly why. So bear with me today. It is going to be a longer one. Hit that subscribe button throughout the process. If I say anything that resonates with you, it's going to be a pleasure. Let's go through it. The complete guide to quit gambling. And again, today, if we want to layer it out into an agenda, what we're going to be talking about is that gambling is a real addiction. We're going to talk about the factors increasing addiction, the consequences of getting addicted, and then, of course, how to quit gambling, as the title of this video has told you. So, a little bit about me to kind of set the scenes of why you might want to listen to what I have to say. I've been through it, and it was at my own doing, so no questions about that. But I've been through it. It all started in 2017 when I was 18 years old, the beginning of my gambling addiction. Now, DFS is daily fantasy sports. And at the time, my friends and I were constantly watching games because we're from Philly, right? We're from just outside Philly in New Jersey, but in Philly. And so whenever we would have a family event, it would be, 1 o'clock on a Sunday, because that's when the Eagles game would kick off, or 7 o'clock on a Friday, because the Sixers game was going to tip off then. Sports served as like this focal point, this center point, no matter where we were or what we were doing. So we always basically were watching games to sum that up. And when we turned 18, my friends and I, we were like, holy crap, we can gamble on these games, although it's not technically gambling, apparently, according to the law. But the daily fantasy sports was what we found. We were like, obviously, we're going to do it, right? It felt like a no brainer. And so when we were 18, we started placing these bets and we had some early wins along the way. But what I noticed right away was that the 7 o'clock game where the Sixers played, we'd all have a contest in. But by the 10 o'clock games where the Lakers or the Kings would be playing, I would be the only one that wanted to play in those contests. So right from the start, it was a social thing for me, the gambling, but I took it further than just the socialization, which is a major trend that we're going to be diving into throughout the rest of the presentation. But essentially, to speed this up, I started gambling with a bookie at this point, placing bets with my friends at this point, and doing regular sports betting with like one of those cryptocurrency casinos at 18 years old. Then I went away to college and I found myself in debt for the very first time because of my gambling during March Madness of 2018. What had happened was it was the very first time in tournament history that a 16 seed, UMBC, the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, beat a 1 seed, Virginia. And it was big headline news. And I didn't gamble on that game. And what I've come to find in reflection is the only thing that was more frustrating for me as a gambling addict than losing a bet was not placing a bet that I think I would have won. And this was a great example. It had never happened before, but my addicted mind, and yes, I would say I was already addicted at this point as a 19-year-old, my addicted mind told me that I should have known that it would happen. And so, what did I do? I put all the money that I had onto the very next game. That was Kansas State versus UMBC, and Kansas State was the 9 seed, I believe, and they beat UMBC. Surprise, surprise. And so that's not what sent me into debt. The frustration from that and feeling like I had missed my opportunity and then couldn't quite ever catch up to it led me to put my entire balance that I had with the bookie on a spring training baseball game, and I'd bet an under. The Yankees were playing, I think it was the Nationals, but I can't ever remember the second team because the game was basically over for me by the time it was the third inning. They put up like 21 runs combined throughout the course of the game. And that was the first time I had to tell my parents, hey, I'm in debt because of gambling. I made a mistake. But at this point, I only thought that my mistake was financial, right? Well, I made a bad pick. I got unlucky. This is a money problem. I'll make sure that I never do this again. These were the things that I was saying. And then they bailed me out. I worked all summer to pay them back, but it was interest free. So thanks for that. But I did find myself with the mindset of this is not a gambling problem. This was just one bad bet. And that was what caused escalation. We put it here. For the next 3 years, I would just go up and down and up and down, and as soon as I was out of any kind of jam or any kind of debt, I would just start betting again, and then it would eventually become bigger bets, and it would spiral into a, full-blown addiction by this point. And I remember in 2020, or I guess it was late 2019, early 2020, I said to myself, like, "Oh, something needs to change. Life isn't good right now, but it's not because of your gambling. That's just that you've been getting unlucky." Like, I always found that excuse. I was just getting unlucky. What I told myself was I needed to change my environment. And so I decided to go and study abroad in early 2020. I picked Australia, which has the highest gambling losses per capita in the world because there's gambling everywhere in Australia. And so for the 3 months we were there before we got sent back due to the pandemic, I was just gambling like 12 hours a day, barely going to classes. If I did go to class, I was gambling on my computer while I was there. It was just all consuming and compulsive. And at that point we got sent back, but now I was 21 years old. And for the next, just year and a half, without even picking my head up, I was just gambling on everything. First sport that came back was Korean baseball. And I was putting all of the money I had into Korean baseball. Can you believe that? Never even been to Korea. I mean, I like bulgogi, don't get me wrong, but I don't know anything about Korea. And I was gambling on it because it was the only thing on. I was like a junkie. I had to get my next bet in. And I was playing casino games and poker and going into debt, paying off debt, working. I was driving pizza at the time. It was just not a good time in my life at all. And the first time that I tried to stop gambling was in 2022 that I really tried to stop. I mean, I went through periods of time where I was like, you lost too much, you need to take a break. Then I'd go right back to it and lose more. But on February 8th of 2022, I had my first like big time realization. And I wish I could say it was the last one, but it was the first. So I had a win a couple days prior, and one thing that I always told myself was I'm gambling so that I can travel the world and do whatever I want, be the man, and not have to work a normal job. This is the kind of stuff I was saying. I had that win, and I booked a plane ticket to go to Paris to meet up with this girl that I was dating at the time. And about 2 hours into it, 2.5 hours into it, I was on the toilet in the hotel spinning slots. And I asked myself, after I lost all my money, I asked myself, what was the point? Why did I do that? And for the first time ever, I didn't have an answer. Because before I would say it's to get rich, to travel the world, to do whatever you want, to prove yourself, to be knowledgeable, to win. But now I didn't have an answer. Why did I just sit on this toilet and spend away my money when I'm here doing the thing that I said I wanted to do? So I came back and I tried to get help. And for about 8 months, I stayed away from gambling. The thing that was missing, which again, we're going to dive into as we get into the how to quit gambling section of this conversation, the thing that I was missing was a purpose. Gambling had become my purpose, and now my purpose was not gambling. I don't know if that resonates at all, but that's not a very fulfilling goal for me. Didn't feel like I was making any progress. In fact, it felt like I was standing completely still, and all I was doing was not gambling. I was working a job I didn't like. I was living an unhealthy lifestyle, but I wasn't gambling. And that was all I had. So I started to feel bad for myself. And on November the 12th of 2022, I caved into an urge to go and gamble. And I'd spend 12 hours on a gambling binge that day. And that was the last day that I gambled, and here's why. It wasn't the lost money. I'd done that before. It wasn't even the time spent gambling. I've felt that before. I felt the emotion of it before. It was that I had taken cash advances and I had my entire net worth held in my hand in dollar bills, $100 bills, but it was in my pocket, and I went to reach for my phone that was also in my pocket. When I grabbed my phone, a bunch of money fell on the floor. I was in the bathroom of the casino at the time, so I scrambled and picked everything up, and I was stressed, and I was like, "Oh my god, I probably dropped some money somewhere else today. Somewhere else in this casino, I probably dropped more money, oh my god." And then I started to laugh because I said, "Huh, if I did drop that money, someone might pick it up and leave with it. They might have a good day. But if I didn't, I'm just gonna go out there and lose it anyway. So I might as well have dropped the money. It would be a better outcome." I wish I could say that was the thought that got me to leave, but then I gambled for 4 more hours and eventually left when I had nothing. But that thought did stick with me, and it keeps me away from gambling to this day. We're gonna dive into all of the signs that popped up along the way there and exactly what I did following that day to get help. But I wanted to give you a little bit of context so you don't just think I'm some random guy trying to scam you. In fact, I want you to know that nothing in this PowerPoint costs money. I have clients that I work with and I market and I run ads for them on my page sometimes. This is going to be non sponsored. Nothing in this is going to cost you money. This is exactly what I did to get help. And the things that do cost money, they're to make the help happen a little bit more personally and a little bit faster. So I don't want to talk bad about them. They're very necessary once you get to a certain point. I'm just sharing what worked for me. And in this particular guide, everything's free. Gambling is a real addiction. Let's talk about the gambling trap because right now we're seeing more gambling than we've ever seen before. Why? Well, casinos and betting platforms are designed to keep you gambling. The influencers and celebrities promote gambling, and they're getting paid more when you lose. So right now, we're seeing this perfectly designed beast of gambling being marketed as a fun little thing to do and a very entertaining thing to do. And while it is absolutely entertaining, we're not talking about both sides of the coin here. We're only seeing people telling us how much money we can win, how awesome life will be when we go and gamble. Everything's going to be awesome. You're going to win big and you're going to be happy if you gamble. In fact, there's some casinos out there that market themselves as the winning feeling is the number one feeling in the world. It's better than everything else. What does that say about our society? It's saying that if you're not gambling and you're not winning, you're a loser, which is ridiculous because every single game in that casino is designed to make you lose. Then, even worse than the influencers, I think, are the people that try to sell you like snake oil salesman type solutions to gambling. Oh, well, you can outsmart the casinos by using my pick system, and we're going to make this profitable, and you're going to be admirable. People are going to respect you for your sports betting knowledge. It's a big, big scam. Like, ask yourself, really, if someone knew how to make millions of dollars gambling, why would they sell that to you instead of just going and gambling? Right? It just it's because you are the way that they make money, not the gambling. But I digress. Let's move on. Some excuses. I could stop anytime. How many times did I tell myself that? I'll quit after I get even. I've gotten even many times during my gambling. So, again, these are some excuses that I was telling myself personally to keep myself gambling. Let me know if you can relate to any of these. Leave a comment letting me know which one you can relate to. I just need one more big win, then I'll be satisfied, right? And then what happens? We have the big win. We feel good about it for a little bit, and then we want to win again. Because as we'll come to find out throughout the rest of this presentation, gambling and a gambling addiction has never been about the wins and losses. It's about just continuing to play. Oh, it's just a hobby. Right? We all have hobbies, right? Hobbies can be something we spend money on. Like if you're someone who goes fishing a lot, you probably spend a lot of money on fishing trips, on fishing gear. So someone who's a gambler might use that as an excuse. Oh, it's my hobby. I can spend some money on entertainment. Yeah, you can, but is it really entertainment for you at this point? Because by the end of my gambling, it was just anxiety and it was being done out of sheer force, sheer habit. Had nothing to do with entertainment by the end. I tried everything. And this is, an excuse of you're trying to stop, so you've tried everything, right? Oh, like I've given that a try. I've given that a try, and then I'll say, okay, have you done X? Have you done Y? Oh no, I haven't even heard of that. What is that? So another excuse that's just out there is, you haven't tried everything by just deleting the apps, guys. If that's all you've done thus far, that's not everything. You're 15 minutes into this video, so there's a decent chance that you're going to know exactly what you need to be doing following this video. But yeah, you didn't try everything yet if you're still gambling. I can guarantee that. And it's covered up here. I'm not sure if the slide 6 thing is popping up on your screens or not, but I'm not that bad. That's the number one reason why in that story that I just told, I didn't tell you how much money I lost. And it's because if I say an amount that's more than what you lost, you'll probably tell yourself, oh, I'm not that bad. Rob's a gambling addict because he lost 10 times more than me. Or Rob's a gambling addict because he lost $100 more than me, right? If there's any distance there, it becomes an excuse. And you say, oh, well, once I get that bad, then I'll stop. So I always tell people that I went into debt 6 times over 6 years to the point where I was working 2 jobs to pay it off. And if that doesn't illustrate it for you, you likely didn't need to hear it anyway. Is gambling addiction a disease, or is this a lack of discipline? Is this something that needs treatment and constant work, or is this something that you just need to change your mindset and it's going to kind of fix itself? Let's dive into each one of these. So, in the disease model, this perspective sees gambling addiction as a brain disorder where repeated exposure to gambling alters your neural pathways related to reward, impulse control, and decision making it increasingly difficult for a person to stop. Now, this is the one that's super supported by science. When we look at the brain of a problem gambler as they're gambling, new pathways are actually being formed. That's right, gambling changes the structure of your brain. And essentially, what is happening is that as you're gambling, dopamine fires off that feel good. Oh, I love that. That's exciting. That feels great. And if it keeps going, you're building new pathways in your brain where that dopamine needs an intense hit to give you the same feeling. It's called building up a tolerance. So basically, as you continue gambling, you have to gamble more or take riskier bets to get the same levels of thrill that you got from smaller bets or less risky bets earlier on. So, in this model of looking at the addiction, you're actually looking at a changing brain, which means that to fix it, you have to stay away from gambling the same way and let other things in life rewire your brain. And that can be really, really boring, which we're going to dive into in a little bit. But imagine like this intense hit and pleasure and thrill going from that to now going to a situation where your most intense hit of pleasure might be spending time with your kids. It might be going on a date with your girlfriend. Still pleasurable activities, good things, but it's a different kind of pathway, right? We'll dive into it. And then the other model of looking at this is the discipline model. This perspective frames gambling addiction as a behavior driven issue where the individual has the ability to exercise discipline and self control to break free from destructive habits. Now, when I give this answer, right, I don't want you to think that it requires no discipline to recover. Recovery requires a ton of discipline, and your behavior is going to drive you to the results. But thinking that your brain is not actually changing as you're developing this problem, and that at any time you can just use your willpower to stop gambling is a massive mistake. Gambling in itself can become an addiction. Anything technically can become an addiction when it's releasing that much dopamine in your brain. But it's more than just using self control. You have to have systems in place because you're fighting against science. You're fighting against your own brain. It's not just the decision that you make once, like, oh, I'm done. I'm not going to gamble anymore. And then you're fine. It takes time. Let's talk about the factors that increase your risk of gambling addiction. A good way to think about a gambling addiction is like your brain is getting hijacked by the dopamine rush, by the feeling that is produced from gambling. So, number one is this illusion of a near win. When you look at the brain of a gambling addict, right, what do you think creates more pleasure? Winning a bet or placing a bet? Well, the answer is placing a bet. And the reason is because as you go to place that bet, your brain is thinking, I can't wait to find out what happens next. The payoff, the win or the loss, is just the recognition of that excitement. So it's comparable to this, right? Say your favorite sports team, say your favorite soccer team, right? They are going into a match to win the league. They have to win this match and then they'll win the championship. The whole week leading up to the game, you're watching reports about it. Everyone on the news is talking about it. The fans are excited. Everyone's hyped. And then the game comes. It's the day of the game. You're out with your friends. You're having some drinks. You're enjoying the environment. You're excited. You're watching the TV. And it's 10 minutes until game time. You're getting excited. You're finally going to experience this game. And then it kicks off. 90 minutes later, you find out that your team won. Are you really gonna feel that much more excited 90 minutes later than you felt leading up to it with all that buildup, all that anticipation? You might be happy that they won, but you would have been watching the game the whole time. You would have known it was coming. There's more excitement in the buildup and the anticipation, and that's what happens in the brain of a gambler. But now we take it a step further and let's talk about a slot machine. You're getting that every second. Boom, result, boom, result, boom, result. The excitement comes from you hitting that button. The payoff comes later and you find out what's going to happen next. Do I have enough money to spin again? That might be what you're asking yourself. And this is what feeds into the illusion of a near win. Now, when we talk about near wins, this is like an actual gambler's fallacy that's programmed into these games. And what it is like as you almost win, finding out that result almost there, and then you just lose, your brain says, that was so close. We almost had it. We just need to keep going. Now, the problem is, in most aspects of life, that's great. If you finish second place in a race, you can train and then maybe you can get first the next time you run it. When it comes to gambling, every event is independent of one another, and you are eventually going to lose because you're playing a game that's designed against you. So, this idea that I'm almost there is just a lie that your brain is generating based on the conditioning you've had your whole life. You're not almost there. Every spin is another chance for you to lose. Another way your brain's been hijacked is this idea of chasing losses and dopamine depletion. This is similar to what we were just talking about. It's like you're building up this tolerance for the amounts that you're gambling, and then you have a loss. You're like, I got to go get that back. So the amounts are getting higher. You're getting more excitement out of it. You don't want to lose your money because that's your fuel to continue gambling. Gambling is a super stimulus. This just basically means that gambling is the most exciting thing in your life at this point. If you're developing an addiction, everything else that gives you dopamine is just not quite the same. And then once again, that tolerance that we were talking about. And then if you do try to stop, you can feel symptoms of withdrawal, like actual physical withdrawal. And usually it manifests itself in boredom. If you're feeling super bored when you quit gambling, it's because everything else in life just isn't giving you that same hit, which makes it incredibly difficult to follow through with leaving gambling in the past. This is called a Custer V chart, and essentially, I won't dive too deep into it, but it just goes through the progression of a gambling addiction from start to recovery. This is something that I will put in the description, and I'll have all the slides in the description as well if you want to check this one out. But if you're reading through this and it kind of feels like the same path that you were on, it's an obvious sign that you have a gambling problem. And essentially, that story that I told you to start off this video is me going through this entire V. Now, there's a few things that keep people gambling. Again, this is your brain being hijacked. This is your brain convincing you to keep playing. And this is what we have to overcome. And then once we've overcome it, we can begin the process of leaving gambling in the past. But here, I'm calling out some of the lies that your brain is telling you as you're gambling. So, this hot hand fallacy. If a gambler's been winning repeatedly, you feel like you're on a hot streak and then you want to keep winning. But in reality, every bet is independent. So, there's no such thing as a hot streak. Your brain likes to recognize patterns. So if you look at like the roulette wheel, a lot of them will have that screen next to it where it says like the past 10 results or the past 20 results of the spins because they want you to find patterns. They want you to feel like red is hot right now or black is due. And that is exactly what gets you to go and place a bet. And maybe that justifies placing a larger bet. But it's like the casino's filled with little like bits and pieces. What do they call them? Like Easter eggs filled with little Easter eggs to get you to go and gamble more. This is just one example. Another, kind of what the inverse of what I just said is the gambler's fallacy. This is like, I'm due for this to happen soon because it's been red 5 times in a row. Black has to come up because, it's 50-50. It's really not even 50-50, but whatever. And then there's the near miss fallacy that we were discussing. I almost had it. Let me just keep going until I get it. Now, now that we've dove into the lies that we were telling ourselves, let's talk about the truth. These 20 signs of gambling addiction are one, I was experiencing all 20, so just to preface, but they are the signs that Gamblers Anonymous uses, which is a support group to help people with a gambling addiction to determine if you actually do have a gambling problem. And so they say if you answer yes to 7 or more of these questions, it's very likely that you have a gambling addiction. And again, I answered yes to all 20. I'm just going to read them through real quick. And while I'm doing that, answer them for yourself and let me know in the comments how many you answered yes to if you're comfortable sharing. 1. Did you ever lose time from work or school due to gambling? Yes. 2. Has gambling ever made your home life unhappy? Yes. 3. Did gambling affect your reputation? Yes. 4. Have you ever felt remorse after gambling? Yes. 5. Did you ever gamble to get money with which to pay debts or otherwise solve financial difficulties? Yes. 6. Did gambling cause a decrease in your ambition or efficiency? Yes. 7. After losing, did you feel you must return as soon as possible and win back your losses? Yes. 8. After a win, did you have a strong urge to return and win more? Yes. 9. Did you often gamble until your last dollar was gone? Yes. 10. Did you ever borrow to finance your gambling? Yes. 11. Have you ever sold anything to finance gambling? Yes. 12. Were you reluctant to use gambling money for normal expenditures? Yes. 13. Did gambling make you careless of the welfare of yourself or your family? Yes. 14. Did you ever gamble longer than you had planned? Yes. 15. Have you ever gambled to escape worry, trouble, boredom, loneliness, grief, or loss? Yes. 16. 16. Have you ever committed or considered committing an illegal act to finance gambling? Yes. 17. Did gambling cause you to have difficulty in sleeping? Yes. 18. Do arguments, disappointments, or frustrations create within you an urge to gamble? Yes. 19. Did you ever have an urge to celebrate any good fortune by a few hours of gambling? Yes. 20. Have you ever considered self destruction or suicide as a result of your gambling? Yes. So, if you answer yes to 7 or more, then once again, it's likely you have a gambling problem. If you're answering 20, like I did, very obviously we have a gambling problem. And it's tough because, a lot of these feel like something that you might experience once or twice if you are like on a binge with your friends or you gamble a little bit too much one night. So it can feel like some of them are almost too easy to answer yes to. But then again, I have that thought of like, I am a gambling addict. It should feel pretty easy to answer yes to them. So I don't know where you might lie with that, but these are some of the common signs of people with a gambling addiction. Let's talk about the consequences of addiction. A lot of people think that a gambling addiction is just about money. And that always bothers me because it goes way deeper than that. If it was just about money, I don't know how many people would actually end up quitting because the money is for us the fuel, as I've mentioned a couple times now, that we use to get our high, to get our thrill, to get our dopamine. But the real consequences come from what happens after that money gets spent. We're talking about strained relationships. You're lying to family and friends about what you need to borrow money for. Hey, my rent was a little bit more expensive this month. Some crazy lie. And they go, "Oh, okay, what do you need? Oh, I need a couple $100. Can you help me out?" And all of a sudden, you start accumulating debts to basically everyone you know. So it stems from the money, but what happens is those relationships get strained. And when they find out that you've been lying to them, you can imagine that's not going to bode very well. So I've lost friendships and relationships as a result of my gambling, for sure. It also leads to mental health struggles. You have those sleepless nights, nights where you're up all night gambling, nights where you're up all night regretting your gambling. There's a mixture of them. Regrets once again and low self-esteem. You feel like your worth, not only your net worth, but like the worth of your life is tethered to your success in gambling. When you are hooked to placing bets, especially like I think with sports betting, you find your sense of meaning through those bets. You say, "Oh, I am the gambler. I am the one who knows how to make these picks." And so it leads to low self-esteem. When you lose, you're like, "What's wrong with me? What's my purpose anyway? Why can't I get this right? Why am I such a bad gambler?" All kinds of things that you say to yourself, when in reality, you're just supposed to lose, but your mind just cannot put 2 and 2 together. It can lead to career setbacks. I remember being late to work many times, skipping work sometimes because I was sad about what had happened, missing tons of classes in college, or if I was at class, just not really being present, just kind of gambling while I was there. And I also really thought that gambling was a better way to make money, as I told myself many times. And I think that stems from like my early experiences with gambling, like taking you back to when I first started. The job that I had at that time was I was working at an ice cream store for $8.38 an hour. So when I would win, say like a $100 contest, that's like 2.5 days of work. I'm like, "Oh my god, why would I ever work again, right? I can just do this." And it's obviously too good to be true because all the games are designed for you to lose long term, but it was really hard to overcome that, right? Because the money moves very quickly in gambling. There might be a day where you win a couple $1,000. The next day, you have nothing. And it's just like it goes really fast. So that was another big thing in recovery, which we'll get to in just a minute now, is like getting used to the speed of money in real life. Because I was so used to spending it really quickly and trying to win it back really quickly that the idea of waiting 2 weeks at a job or waiting a month now with some of the clients that I have in my marketing business to pay, it's just like that's a really big difference from waiting 10 seconds to get paid. It's that instant gratification that I was getting before that was really hard to overcome. But another consequence is lost time and energy. You're spending days, hours at a time, just spinning, chasing after a big win, researching bets, thinking about bets. You're wasting your life away thinking about how to solve the problems that you're creating by doing exactly that. What else can I say, really? Now, why has gambling addiction increased as a whole? For those that don't know, you're 30% more likely to have a gambling addiction in America today than you were back 3 years ago. Why? Tons of advertising, no regulatory body. I just recently found out that the American Gaming Association, who I thought was the regulatory body to help protect gamblers, their mandate is to make the gaming industry as much money as they can. So there's no one actually protecting problem gamblers except for councils funded by casinos. So you might wonder, where does that lead us? That leads us to a much different video than this one, and I don't want to take too much of your time on that issue. But right now, basically, we're seeing tons of advertising with no one checking it. The speed of play has increased, and you can bet more than you've ever been able to gamble before. We see the streamers doing $100,000 bonus buy spins. You have access to that as well. Unfortunately, it is just insane how much money you can gamble in a few seconds. You have increased number of options. There's sports betting, there's iGaming, there's casinos, there's lottery, there's everything that you could want. There's poker. It exists. It's in your face. And right now it's being marketed such that if you're not gambling, once again, you're weird or something is wrong. AI based advertising, when you get those pop up ads, it's because they know exactly what you like to gamble on, when you like to gamble, who you like to gamble with. You're going to get those pop ups, and they're going to be the most tempting types of advertising that exist out there. Oh, and they're write offs for the casinos, in case you wanted to get any angrier about it. And just this mass normalization of gambling. Right now, influencers are everywhere, and they're telling you that gambling is great. It's something that you should be doing. And unfortunately, people seem to be believing them. Let's do it. I took up 32 minutes, 33 minutes almost before we got to this, but it was really important for me to build that context up. Let's talk about how to quit gambling because quitting gambling was not easy, but it's simple. And I want to get into it. Let's talk about step number one, deciding to quit. If you're at this point in the video, there's a pretty decent chance that you're ready for step one or you're really, really wanting to be ready for step one. So let's talk about it. Quitting starts the moment that you decide that you're done with gambling. You got to stop saying one more bet or I'll stop when I get even because these are just little excuses, as we've mentioned, that just keep you going. It gets you to place that next bet over and over again. The moment that you're really ready to quit, the moment that you're honestly ready, not just like that you think it would be better for your finances if you quit, it would make your mom happier if you quit, your girlfriend happier, whatever. No. The point that you're ready to actually quit is when you ask yourself, what is the point of this anyway? I always had an answer for that question. Always, always, always. Establish meaning in my life, win, be the best, don't have to work a job, be happy. The last day I gambled, I didn't have an answer to that. If you ask yourself that question and you have an answer and you've convinced yourself that it's true, then you're not ready to quit. So if you ask yourself, what's the point of this anyway? And you go, oh, well, it makes me happy. You're probably not ready to quit gambling. I'm not going to lie to you. You have to get to the point where you're like, damn, I have no idea why I'm doing this actually. I think it's fun, but no, it's not fun. It gives me anxiety. I think it's a way to make money. Oh, but I keep losing money. My friends seem to really be having a good time, but we don't see the truth about how they're actually doing. Once you boil down all those answers and you're at the point that you don't know what the point of the gambling is anymore, now you're ready to go to step two. Step two, identify your triggers. Some things that made me want to gamble all the time, basically every time they happen, was when I was watching sports. I thought that I was a huge sports fan. I thought I was the biggest sports fan in the world because before I started gambling, we were always watching sports, remember? It was like what we did, it was our thing. And then when I was gambling, I knew everything about sports. I knew how many rebounds LaMarcus Aldridge had in his last game because his over under was 1 point favorable to me this time. Like I had all these kinds of like things that I'd say to myself, and it was all bullshit, but I said it to myself. And watching sports without gambling now kind of feels like eating a plain bagel. It's okay. I had one for breakfast, in fact, today. But without the gambling, it just doesn't have the same flair that it used to for me. So early on in my recovery, it was really hard for me to watch sports because they made me want to gamble because I couldn't enjoy the game without gambling on it. So if you're feeling like that, identifying that in your head and being like kind of aware ahead of time, like I'm not ready to watch this game yet, is very important. And you might reach a point that you develop a love for sports again. Who knows? I'm enjoying them a little bit. It's like that plain bagel. Sometimes bagels are good, but if it's gonna lead you to gambling, it's best to steer away from it right now. But I think you can get there with time. But again, we're at step 2 right now. Give it some time. When I would feel stressed, bored, or lonely, my default was to like stimulate myself, right? And when I was gambling, that just meant picking up my phone and starting to place bets. In fact, I was at a point where I could make my bets with my eyes closed and know, what I had deposited XYZ. If these kinds of negative emotions lead you to wanting to gamble, it's an obvious sign that, you need to find a replacement for what to do in those moments. So now, you know, not that I think this is the best solution, but what I do now if I feel stressed, bored, or lonely, I'd love to tell you, I go to the gym, I get a nice pump in, and to a certain extent, I can do that. But I found myself watching a lot of YouTube, specifically as it relates to like Pokemon games. I've redeveloped like my love for a childhood game that I had. So, call me a nerd, call me whatever you want, but when I'm feeling these negative emotions, I can either choose to address them or run from them. And, I'd love to tell you I always address them, but that's just not realistic. We're human beings. Sometimes we just don't have the mental bandwidth for it. Keep yourself busy with something you enjoy that won't ruin your life. That's what's really important there. Having easy access to money and not having enough money are major triggers. We're going to dive into those a little bit more in the next step. But essentially, like, knowing this ahead of time will allow you to make decisions that will lead to better outcomes. And I don't want to go too much deeper down that because I'll expose what the next step is, but we're going to get there in a second. Fights with a loved one or sudden changes to your work and lifestyle kind of cause an urge to gamble. You again have to have a plan ahead of time. If I have a fight with my spouse, what will I do? And you need to have an answer for that before it happens. If I was to lose my job at work, what would I do? If my lifestyle were to suddenly change because I break my leg, what would I do? And these are tough questions, and it can feel a little bit cynical or negative to kind of come up with a plan ahead of time. But knowing what to do ahead of time is the major overall theme here in the next couple of steps. Planning ahead will save you in those moments where you used to default to gambling. Step 3, and this is the one I didn't want to expose earlier, blocking access to money and gambling. There's 3 things that you need to do basically immediately. 2 absolutely immediately. 1 is, I guess, kind of optional. The first that is absolutely necessary is to self-exclude from casinos. Now, for those that don't know what a self-exclusion is, it is basically telling the casino, "Hey, I don't want you to let me gamble here anymore. I don't think it's a good idea. Please ban me." And they have different lengths of time for which you can do that, but you're basically removing yourself from the ability to place bets at that particular location. Now, what I did was I self excluded everywhere that I possibly could. Some states in the United States have self exclusion lists where you can one click ban yourself from all the casinos in your state. Some countries have that as well. So I can think in the UK, they have GamStop, which is the same thing. In some states, they don't have it. So, strangely, in Nevada, where there's a billion casinos, they don't have a statewide self exclusion program. So, in that case, you would have to ban yourself at all of the casinos that you've played at. So that's one by one. And the way that you do it is usually by going onto their website, finding their responsible gambling page, and filling out the self exclusion form. If you're in person, you can do it at the security desk of any casino. And it's not necessarily a glamorous or fun thing. But let's think about the reason that we're doing it. If we've reached a point where we don't trust ourselves to stop gambling when we say we're going to stop, self exclusion makes it so that we can't even put ourselves in that situation again. And it might feel like you've been defeated. It might feel embarrassing. But at the end of the day, who gives a shit? You want to live a better life. You don't want to wake up under a bridge one day, homeless with absolutely nothing. Your family doesn't talk to you anymore, all because you couldn't stop spinning a roulette wheel. Okay? You need to take this step seriously if you want to leave gambling in the past, because making it more difficult for yourself to gamble makes it easier for you to stay away. With all the access that we have nowadays, it's always going to be such that you can go and place a bet. I can't tell you like a lie right now and tell you that this is going to solve your entire life, but it's really important because it's not just to put yourself on a list and feel like you've accomplished something. It's to make it more difficult. And if something becomes more difficult to access, your brain is going to have more time to think about the decision. If you are self excluded from a casino and you go, "Oh, I want to gamble today. Let me log in." Not allowed in. Okay, let me log into this other one. Not allowed in. At some point while you're doing that, I want you to have the thought, "Oh, I remember why I'm on this list now. It's because the last time I gambled, I lost all of my money, went into debt, lied to my mom about why I needed money, and then lost that, and ended up working for 80 hours a week for 3 months to pay it back." That's what you should be remembering when you're trying desperately to log into a casino because you're so tempted to place a bet because this one's gonna win. Finish the thought. Even if you win, you're gonna give it back because what happens every single time? And that's why you self-exclude. Now, the one that I would say is kind of optional, and it really depends on you, your preferences of where you've been gambling thus far, is blocking gambling websites. So there's apps like Gamban and Gamblock. And again, I said this wouldn't be a sponsored video. Those do have a cost, so this is why it's optional. I've worked with them in the past, but honestly, I'm just saying this because it's an extra idea. If the self-exclusion piece in itself doesn't feel like it's enough, and you're finding websites to gamble on, downloading an app like that can block the gambling apps and websites from your devices. Again, making it more difficult. You will always find a loophole if you want to, but giving yourself the chance to remember the pain that gambling has caused will make a big difference in your decision making process. Now, this third one is absolutely necessary, in my opinion. It's what really, I mean, but above all else, I think this is the thing that did the most for me. And it was having someone manage or have oversight over your financial situation. So, in my case, it was my mom. As a 23, 24-year-old man, I went to my mom and said, "Hey, mom, I need you to manage my bank account because I don't trust myself." And that can feel embarrassing. It feels like you're giving up a sense of control, you're losing a sense of freedom. But I would screw it up if I had it. Let's just be honest, right? We're desperately like clinging to this sense of identity and ego and freedom of having our own money as gambling addicts. We're like, "Oh, I would never want someone else to have to do that. I can handle it myself." Yeah, but what's happened every time you handled it yourself? I went to debt 6 times. I don't want that for you. Just man up, woman up, whatever it is, up, and just have someone watch you. It sucks. It feels like you're a little kid again. But I carried around just the amount of cash that I needed for my weekly expenses, and I didn't have my login, I didn't have a card, I had no way to access money without calling my mom. And suddenly, I didn't wanna call my mom for money. It was a terrible situation, yes, but every time I'd have a temptation to gamble, I didn't have any money. I didn't have any ammo, any fuel, and the only way that I could get it was if she, allowed me to withdraw it. And if I said, "Hey, I wanna withdraw it to gamble on the Sixers," obviously she's not gonna do it, right? And if I had lied, she'd be like, "Why do you need that extra money?" And it wouldn't ever happen, right? So having someone at least have oversight over your spending can give you that little bit of an extra mental block to going and placing a bet. Because if you have to explain, "Where did this $400 go? Where did this $1,000 go?" You're not going to want to have to tell that person that you gambled because it's terrible. It's not a good feeling. So it's like extra accountability for you. And it's another way of putting space between you and the next bet. If you're noticing a pattern right now, making distance between the thought and the action is the key to recovery. If you are able to say, "Okay, I want to gamble right now, but I'm not going to, or I'll do it another time," and you just keep pushing it away, eventually those urges begin to subside. And you reach a point where you don't have urges to gamble anymore. People always ask me, it's like, "Rob, do you still feel like you want to gamble?" Hell no. Hell no. I'm getting screwed every time I place a bet because we're supposed to lose, and I remember what happens when I gamble. You don't want to do that. Now, step 4, finding healthy alternatives. This was a big one for me, and one that it took me a couple tries to get right. So, finding exercise, new hobbies, personal projects, building your relationships in life, focusing on your work, learning new skills, building a business, these are all ideas. But why do we need any of this? Okay. When I was gambling, I would gamble on average for about 6 to 8 hours a day. Let's call it 8 hours a day. So when I stopped gambling, I now had 8 waking hours where I did not have anything to do. So in the beginning, I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and then I'd get tempted and I'd go and gamble. Which is why just stopping and like staring at the grass or staring at the wall isn't enough. Because if you're not finding new things to do with your time, things that give you meaning, pursuing a worthwhile goal, finding novelty, you're going to get bored. And as a gambling addict, when you get bored, your default setting is to go and gamble. So it's not going to be like you snap your fingers and you find a miraculous business that you want to start, or you find that you want to spend 8 hours a day with your wife now because you want to grow your relationship, right? It's not going to be like magic rainbows and sunshine for you, but keeping yourself busy, finding new things, trying new things will give you the time, or use up the time rather, that's going to pass anyway. And if you're making consistent progress towards anything that is worthwhile, you'll begin to feel positive. Building this business, the one that we're on right now, ODAAT Gambling Awareness, has led to me living a life so much better than what it was when I was gambling. And the only thing I had to do to get here, well, two things: not gamble and keep trying. Not keep trying to gamble, but keep trying to grow the business. And the way that I did that was just making content all day long, 8 hours a day, grinding it. And that might not sound pleasant, and it might sound like I'm full of shit. But at the end of the day, find something in your life that you care about, keep trying it. It'll start to feel better with time. And as you move forward, life will get gradually easier. But it's not a one stop shop, and you're going to feel bored. And we're going to dive into those feelings in a little bit. Step 5 to quitting gambling is the power of support groups or therapy. Now, again, non-sponsored video, so I'm not going to talk about the treatment centers or the therapists that I work with. But here are kind of 4 options, and before I dive into them, rather, here's what you need to know about support groups. Trying to quit gambling alone is a losing effort because you rely too heavily on your own willpower. As we've discussed earlier, this is not a willpower issue. This is a brain issue, a disease issue. And so going to a support group and consistently finding people to stay accountable to, talking to them every single week about what you've been feeling, your gambling temptations, your life as a result of the gambling that you did in the past. This keeps you accountable and it keeps you on the right path. Now you can find this in Gamblers Anonymous, Smart Recovery, gamblersinrecovery.com. Groups of people who all struggle with a gambling addiction coming together to share their stories, talk about what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, what tempted them, how they've dealt with those temptations, learning from experience, basically. Then there's therapy and there's treatment centers, and those are basically to get more individualized plans for yourself, to work with professionals. These are things that what you should consider after you've really given the steps in this video a try. And if the steps really didn't do it for you, then finding something like that could be good. But then, just again, another form of connection is online forums, going to those meetings, or just talking to those around you about what's going on. Maybe it's your girlfriend, your brother, your sister, your husband, your wife. Talking to them about how you're feeling, being open. It's a really big change because as a compulsive gambler, I was a compulsive liar, and I would just lie all the time, basically for no reason. So telling the truth was a big challenge for me, but it's something that's taken a weight off of my shoulders. And now I'm brutally honest, unfortunately, sometimes. For example, today someone wanted to take a phone call. They said, "Do you have time?" And I could have just said, "Yeah, give me 5 minutes." But I said, "Yeah, I need to finish the shower." I was like, maybe I didn't need to say that. But, it's just a new habit that I have of telling the truth and being honest with people because for so long I was the exact opposite. So finding connection with others, bouncing ideas off of them, staying accountable to them, but also hearing what's worked for them and what hasn't worked for them can make a huge impact on your life. And it does on mine. I go to a support group meeting still to this day, every Tuesday night that I have the ability to go. and I share my story and I hear other people's. Let's talk about the challenges that will come inevitably with these steps. As mentioned earlier, there is a withdrawal phase. I didn't even know it was called that or was like that. I just felt so bored after I stopped gambling. I was anxious, I was angry, irritable, and I had mood swings. And I had urges to gamble. And of course, I still have difficulty focusing. That's why I've been talking for 50 minutes in a circle. But this idea of withdrawal, I didn't know it was called that, but I felt it because you've lost your coping mechanism if you quit gambling as an addict. You've lost the thing that brings you that pleasure, that feeling of accomplishment, your money making opportunity. Like you've lost everything in your head. You didn't really lose everything, but you feel like you did when you give it up because you're so used to going to that for everything. And so it becomes a little bit difficult to deal with that, but it's temporary. And so there's no like way of sugarcoating it. If you're gonna quit gambling, you very well might experience these emotions. You might feel bored. You might feel hopeless. You might feel depressed without it. But with time, you're gonna realize that that's just your brain trying to get you to go back to that strongly ingrained habit, and it gets a little easier and a little easier. And I remember early on, I would be irritable. I would just find myself in a very low state because I was working to pay off debt. I was bored. I was sad. But then 3 months, 4 months goes by, and I just don't feel sad anymore. I feel maybe neutral. And I'm finding some things to do with my time. I'm making these videos and they suck, but I'm feeling good about it. I'm feeling like it's helping me progress. Like I'm making progress instead of just losing. 5 months go by and I'm feeling like a little happy maybe. I paid off most of my debt. I'm feeling like I'm making progress. Still feel behind, but feeling like I can do this. 6 months goes by. Going out with my friends again, feeling good, feeling better. A year goes by. Whole year. Life is completely different. Now I'm running a business. I'm helping people. I'm feeling like I'm accomplishing things with my time. Getting healthier, I'm more focused. There's less brain fog. I feel good. 2 years go by. Life is unimaginably different than it was. I can't even remember sometimes how it feels to be at those low points because I haven't had them. I still have low points, don't get me wrong, but not that low. Now my problems are like, you know, I didn't get my work done, or I slept in too long, or I stubbed my toe. Or my problems before were how do I get enough money to cover up this lie that I just told my mom so that I don't have to tell her that I've done it again. The withdrawal was worth it. The boredom, the feeling of regret, the loneliness, the anger, it was worth it. Because now, 2 years plus since the last bet, life is different. Life is good again. Now, I get some frequently asked questions, and I just want to address them here before we move towards the end of this video. Why did I quit gambling? As I told you about that day on November the 12th, 2022, I reached a point where I no longer had an answer to the question of why I was doing this. I'd tried everything. I tried different strategies, different formulas, different games. No matter what I tried, I always ended up gambling compulsively and losing everything that I had and more, going into debt 6 times over the course of 6 years to the point where I had to work 2 jobs to pay it off. I quit gambling because there was no longer a reason for me to be doing it. I hope you don't have to reach that, like, really low point to realize that if you're someone that has a gambling problem. I hope that conversations like this one and, other videos maybe on this channel and other channels can kind of supplement some of that and help you get help a little bit faster than I did. But I quit because it was finally my time. Do I have to quit? No, you don't have to quit. But what happens if you don't? Well, if you're a gambling addict and you don't quit gambling, inevitably, you'll lead to, they say, prison, insanity, or death. So let's look at all three options. The first is you gamble so much that you run out of financial options, but you absolutely have to keep gambling, so you steal money from someone in order to do it. You end up going to jail for theft. Insanity. You go so crazy, losing all your money, riding this constant roller coaster of highs and lows that you eventually consider and then attempt to take your own life. 1 in 5 people with a gambling addiction will attempt and or complete suicide as a result of their gambling addiction. 1 in 5, 20%, which would eventually be the third outcome of death. Either from that or from going homeless, ending up starving to death because you've gambled away everything and you've found yourself bankrupt for the seventh time. These are not great outcomes, I'm not going to lie. And they may sound like exaggeration. They may sound like I'm making this up as a fear factor, or I'm just lying to you to get you to follow my point or live my lifestyle. But I'm only sharing the stories that I've personally heard other people tell. I have seen absolute horror stories. And as a 26-year-old, I consider myself fortunate that the majority of what I lost was money and some relationships that probably would have been lost anyway. If I had continued to gamble, I would have eventually had more to lose. Maybe a house, a wife, kids, who knows? The longer you keep going, the more you have to lose and the less that you'll end up having. Because a compulsive gambler can never just stop. You'll never have a big enough win to satisfy you. You'll always chase after the next one over and over and over again. Prison, insanity, or death. If you don't believe me, this video will be here if you ever do. Is sports betting considered gambling? Yes. Oh my God, yes. This new generation, and I feel like an old head saying it. Someone called me Unk the other day. I thought that was ridiculous, but whatever. They think that sports betting is investing because they've been told by so many fake gurus online that they can make money with sports betting. Gambling is any betting or wagering for self or others, whether for money or not, no matter how slight or insignificant, where the outcome is uncertain or depends upon chance or skill. You can replay that point because I just word vomited it. But basically, anytime that you're risking money and it's uncertain, and especially within a short time frame, you are gambling. It is gambling. You don't know how many points your team is going to score. Your star player could twist his ankle. He could get yelled at by a fan. It could hurt his feelings, and he could be on the bench sad because he's upset. There's a million, billion, trillion things that can happen in each sporting event that will change the outcome. You cannot accurately predict it over the long run. Even if you were to get to the point where your sports bets were a 50-50 coin toss, you still lose money because of the house edge on every single bet. You are not going to make money with sports betting because sports betting is gambling. Is poker considered gambling? Yes. Once again, fitting into that definition. Is there any skill involved? In poker, the argument can be made that there is. But because of the fact that you can make the absolute correct play over and over again and still lose all your money, it is gambling. You will lose money if you play poker. And I'm sorry if you do not like that. What's changed in your life since you quit? I've been able to create a business that allows me to sustain my lifestyle, whereas before I was borrowing money to survive. I no longer have to worry about my next paycheck coming in because I have enough money built up in my savings now that I can survive an emergency, whereas before I was just constantly creating emergencies. All of my problems before were like absolute catastrophes of like monumental proportion as I had to try to navigate lies and horrible experiences that I was putting myself through and ending up really ruining my life. Whereas now my problems are basically, hey, this thing needs to get fixed. Okay, let's fix it. It's manageable. You're not going to have a good day every day, and it's not all rainbows and sunshines and horses shitting gumdrops, but you will eventually reach a point where you can face your problems head on. And even if you need a little bit more time, your coping mechanism now might be watching Pokemon instead of gambling away thousands of dollars. I would take that any day of the week. Let's talk about the key takeaways from this. You need to make the decision that you're ready to quit gambling, and that comes from being able to answer the question of what is the point with there's not a point. Then you need to be able to know what triggers you so you can make plans ahead of time to be prepared for those situations. You need to limit your access to both money and gambling itself by doing self exclusions and having someone manage your finances with you. You need to find alternatives for your time. For me, that was making content, going to the gym, and now watching Pokemon videos. Keeping yourself busy, pursuing something that gives you some meaning, and filling the time that you would have otherwise spent gambling is very important. And then going to support group meetings to stay accountable to others, find ideas that might work in your own recovery, and just remind yourself of why you are trying to quit gambling on a regular basis. You are not just giving up gambling, you are getting back your life. For 6 years, I was wasting my days away chasing after a win I didn't even need and I was never supposed to get to feel like I was accomplishing something with my life. Your life is worth much more than money. And if you even want to look at it just as your life is worth money, you're not going to make it by gambling. You're only going to end up losing in the long run because every single game is designed for you to lose. I was living a shell of the life that I deserved to live, and I refuse to keep going down that path. I want to see you making decisions that will lead to a better outcome for yourself and for everyone else around you that's impacted directly as a result of your gambling. Millions and millions of people are struggling with this issue, and my hope is that this video can help you to just get through it a little bit faster. It's a lifelong journey, but after a little bit of time goes by, you're going to forget why you were even craving that bet so badly. It might feel hopeless. You might feel down right now. It might feel like you're at your absolute end with this, but it can and will get better as you put the work in, follow these steps, and you will begin to live a happier and healthier life. You have a choice today. Here's some information if you're looking to contact me or you're looking to check out any of the resources that I have. Basically, on the website, I put together resources for basically your location. I did my best. I don't know about everywhere on earth, but I did what I could to make sure that when you go and you put in your location, you will get the resources that you need to begin your recovery journey. These, of course, are my socials. Not that you can click on any of these links, but once again, I'm putting these PowerPoint slides, hopefully, in the description of this video, and if not, they will be somewhere on the website. So, hope that you've enjoyed the conversations thus far today. I want to ask that if you've enjoyed what you've watched, then hit that subscribe button and check out this video of someone who's in recovery from a gambling addiction to look at what actually happens when you follow these steps, because things can get better, but we have to take it on one day at a time.